Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 19th December 2024, where we will be discussing 7 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. In this discussion, we'll be dividing the same into two parts. Firstly, we'll be starting with the analysis part, where in the first one, we'll be taking one article, one editorial from the Hindu, wherein we'll be discussing about the Agri-Carbon Markets and the significance it holds for India. In the second section of the analysis article, we'll be discussing regarding the recent warming of ties between India and China and how and what are the various significance that will be emanating from the same. In the next part of the discussion, we'll be starting with the simplified portion where we'll be discussing 5 more important articles which are highly crucial for the upcoming prelims 2025 examination. So stay tuned. Global warming induced climate change is a very important and a concerning matter for the entire world as of now. And herein we have various methods as to how we can reduce global warming and hence mitigate the effects of climate change. Nevertheless, we always rely on the Western nations for their finance, and also they are also partly responsible for the same because of their own historical responsibilities, their own historical emissions over a period of time. But the developing world has realized that they cannot be reliant on that particular opportunity for a longer period of time. That is why we have to come up with innovative solutions as to how we can finance our own efforts in combating the climate change. So that is where we have the initiative, or say the broader idea of setting up an agri-carbon market. Because as of now, carbon markets have the potential to transform Indian agriculture. Now this is in tandem with our own agricultural system. Now we have heard about carbon markets, where I will be also explaining very briefly in the very first slide what carbon markets are. But we also understand over a period of time we have to integrate carbon markets in each and every sector of our economy, and hence where we find the agri-carbon market, which is integrated with our Indian agricultural system, which can turn sustainable farming products into a sustainable business product for our Indian farmers. We'll be explaining how. Now here, this is a very important article for your prelims examination, where we have the concepts of economy and social development. Along with the same, we also have concepts of ecology and environment. In GS3, we have to study about the major cropping patterns in the entire country, wherein we have to discuss about how we have to conserve soil, we have to retain the soil moisture, which are favorite topics of UPSC mains. And also we have to talk about conservation part of a syllabus too, which pertains to our environment and ecology portion. Now when we talk about carbon markets, what I mean is that there must be a suitable mechanism for the entire world where they can trade carbon credits to reduce environmental pollution and degradation, and hence reduce the greenhouse gases. Now we know that the greenhouse gases are mainly the oxides of carbon, right? Then we have sulfur oxides, then we have oxides of nitrogen, right? We have like this many greenhouse gases which increase in concentration in the Earth's atmosphere, and it traps heat and increases the overall temperature. So to combat that, what we have to understand is to intensify certain industries in the entire world which can actually bring down the overall greenhouse gases emissions. How to do that? Imagine that this emitter A is the manufacturer of conventional cars, right? On the other side, imagine that this industry or emitter B is producing electronic vehicles or EV. We know that electronic vehicles use cleaner technology, and hence we can understand, you can generalize that over a period of time, emitter B will be emitting less greenhouse gases, right? So that particular factory is doing a good job. So don't you think that this factory will be incentivized by the government, or say by the other say private sector? And that is how the carbon credits are generated. So emitters who emit less greenhouse gases, right, they can sell some of their carbon dioxide emission capacity or limits to some other emitters who are emitting more. For example, in the case here, who are producing traditional cars, they are producing more and more greenhouse gases, so they will be producing more. So what for example the government can do, government can say that in a month you can only emit 100 units of carbon dioxide, that is 100 units of greenhouse gases. So for example, this particular factory, since they are producing less greenhouse gases, they are producing maybe 60, so they have an excess of 40 units to sell to this particular factory, who can use this 40 to produce more cars. So in this way we understand that the overall greenhouse gas particular kind of emission limit is set, and that is where the excess kind of units can be sold off to other industries. So this is the general idea of how carbon credits are generated, and carbon credits can be kind of regulated or generated under two ways. Firstly, there can be a compliance, or say a mandatory or statutory compliance based on international agreements, based on national laws, right? For example, we have the UN standards for proper amount of carbon markets. On the other hand, there can be also voluntary standards. That means these are, say, the standards which have been set by the private industry themselves to regulate and manage the amount of CO2, or say the greenhouse gases, with reference to the carbon credits, right? So there are VEDA, there are gold standards which regulate as to how proper codes of standards are set for the quality of carbon credits. We cannot sell or generate any kind of carbon credits, right? I can sell my own carbon credits tomorrow, but that won't be accepted by the other private sector, or say by the government themselves. So that is why there must be proper amount of standards which are set by voluntary and compliance kinds of, say, carbon credit generation. But here we find that there have been some recent developments which are highly encouraging for the entire carbon markets, where we have under the COP29, it was approved that there should be a centralized UN carbon market around the entire world. On the same page, on the same lines, India has also launched its own national compliance and voluntary carbon markets, right? Compliances are generally set up by the government, and voluntary markets are generally set up by the private sector or NGOs or climate say related organizations. And also recently NABARD and ICAR has inaugurated, or say kind of for one of the very first time, has tried to introduce agriculture based carbon credit products, and herein we will be bringing in the topic of carbon farming. Now carbon farming will be translating into agri-carbon markets. So the carbon credits which will be generated by the practice of carbon farming, farmers will be able to sell them to any industry, not only in agriculture. They can be selling the same to, say, a car manufacturer, to say steel and cement industry, to any other industry. So we understand that agriculture itself will be a very attractive opportunity for the farmers to grow crops and have high amount of productivity. On the same lines, we understand plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? And that is why we understand that there is a huge amount of carbon dioxide which is also stored in our soils. And here we understand that soil is a huge reservoir of CO2, of carbon dioxide and various other gases too. And that is why the main idea of carbon farming is not to disturb the soil. We have to have proper amount of sustainable practices, wherein we will be sustainably trying to manage the soil and try not to disturb the soil too much. This can be practiced with reference to various, say, traditional practices and some modern practices too. For example, we can have reduced fertilizer application, because fertilizer application disturb the soil. We can have sowing companion crops. We can actually plant 2 or more crops with the same main crop. We can have eliminate bare farrows, and we can also reduce the tillage, or say disturbing the soil too much. Then we will be also having agroforestry as an option, because we know already that forests are very efficient at absorbing heavy amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere. So these are the various practices which we can adopt with reference to carbon farming, because the benefits that they will be giving: firstly, they will be increasing crop yield. Why? Because we have greater amount of CO2 right now in the soil, because we are doing carbon farming. And if we are capturing the CO2 from the atmosphere, we are generating what? We are actually reducing the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So we are doing good for the entire world. We are trying to reduce the global warming potential too. So this is a benefit which the farmers can actually reap. They can sell their carbon credits to any other industry in this manner. Apart from this, we have various other benefits. We can actually sequester more carbon. We can provide habitat for pollinators that can actually thrive under carbon farming. Better amount of carbon farming can absorb rain and retain soil moisture over a period of time, hence improving the, say, moisture content of the soil, right? Hence also combating desertification, which is a very serious issue right now. But here we have to understand carbon markets, especially when we talk about carbon farming, they operate on two principles. Firstly, additionality and permanence. To understand additionality, imagine that there is a farm, right? The farmer always cultivates using agroforestry or say sustainable ways of managing the soil to not disturb the soil too much and hence retain carbon dioxide. So that particular farmer will not be fulfilling the additionality clause. Why? Because additionality refers that there should be some carbon farming projects where the farmer is practicing those practices for the very first time, right? So those farmers should be adopting new practices, right? And the next one, which is permanence, it means that a farmer who has converted her farm for carbon farming and doing these healthy practices, that particular farmer must be doing over a long period of time. Later, after 5 to 6 years, she cannot say that they will be converting back to conventional farming, right? So that is where we have to understand this. And the scale and the potential of the carbon farming is huge. That is, there are over 50 projects in the entire world which is targeting around 1.6 million hectares of agricultural land, which has an annual goal of generating 4.7 million carbon credits. So we understand that this is the potential of the entire world with just 50 projects. So imagine if the number increases, what the number would be the same with reference to carbon credits. And if there would be more carbon credits, on one side we understand that the farmers will be having higher crop yield if we have higher amount of CO2 in the soil itself. But that is one side of the story. The another side of the story is that they are being compensated for doing this kind of farming. So it is win to win on both sides, right? So that is where we understand is making this carbon farming practice very, very lucrative. Within the same concept, 2018, in 2018, UPSC framed this question is, with reference to what is carbon fertilization, right? Based on the things we have discussed as of now. You let me know in the comments as to what do you mean by carbon fertilization from these 4 options, right? And also on the same line, we have something which we know as ocean fertilization. It is also kind of related to carbon fertilization. It starts with, say, inclusion of nutrients from, say, human activities such as iron sulfate, which will be collecting various phytoplanktons and various other microorganisms, which they will be creating more and more CO2. They will be demanding more CO2, and the excess demand of CO2 will be made or will be met from the excess amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So hence later that particular thing will be converted into biomass, and hence we can have better amount of carbon dioxide collection on the ocean or sea floor. So in this way also we can have sequestration of carbon dioxide in the ocean itself. This was a related topic, which is why I thought of discussing the same with you. Now there are some challenges with carbon farming in India. There are some challenges. Firstly, in India we find there is a varied amount of soil composition all around the country. So there cannot be a uniform kind of standards, or say if there would be uniform standards, it will be causing some trouble for the farmers and for the authorities to determine the exact price of the carbon, right? Next, we also find that geographical location is wide and vast in the country, right? So implement the same to kind of monitor the same in Western Ghats, in Northeast India, and also in the plains of India. It is very difficult as of now with the existing mechanism. So there needs to be coming up, the government needs to come up with more and more laws and also particular amount of mechanisms for the private sector to manage the same. The next challenge is that carbon farming also requires crops that can be suitable with the amount of, say, traditional and, say, sustainable practices, right? So we have to identify those varieties of crops which are not done yet as of now, and if at all they are done, they are also kind of costly to implement on ground. So financial constraints are there, and also we find that the funding mechanisms for the same is not yet clear, because we know that the financial mechanism in the country as of now, for example, the banks are say not as of clear as to what benefits the farmers will be getting with reference to interest rates from the various loans and from the credit financing mechanisms and so on. And finally, we have various parts of our country, for example, say Punjab, Western UP, Haryana, they are facing severe amounts of groundwater crisis, and already we find that the water content in the soil is kind of declining due to heavy use of fertilizers there, right? And this is why we find this is also posing one kind of challenge. And one case study has been conducted recently, where you can use these case studies in your mains answers to get those additional points. So the case study pertained to the states of Haryana and Madhya Pradesh, where the research concluded that the carbon farming, which the case study focused on, carbon farming projects in the states of Haryana and Madhya Pradesh involved only, say, the affluent sections of farmers, and neglected the marginalized groups, for example, the SC communities, ST communities and women, where their participation is low, maybe due to lack of awareness or the lack of finance, right? Also, we understand that the land distribution favored non-marginalized castes. So we understand that this practice is much more popular, or say, if at all it is adopted right now, it is being adopted in the, say, higher castes, among the higher castes. Also, practices like zero tillage, intercropping, reduced chemical fertilizer used, fulfill additional conditions, right? So this means that there are some sets of farmers who are already involved in this particular sector. Remember those two principles, additionality and permanence. So they are already kind of way ahead apart from the marginalized sections. And we also understand that the challenges are firstly poor communication, because 45% of the farmers are uninformed of this particular, say, projects. Next, limited training is also one concern, where 60% lack necessary skills to undertake carbon farming. Also, financial setbacks are there, that no carbon credits for 99% of the farmers have been made as of now, right? So this is also one of the very serious issue, that despite they're generating carbon credits, they're not being paid for that. And if they're not giving paid for that, already the cost is too high, right? So why will the other farmers also be adopting the same? And also, why will be the marginalized sections who require a lot of funding for the same will be trying to adopt this? Because they're not getting payments on time with reference to the carbon credits generated. While this particular thing is not the same in US, UK, Australia, where there the carbon markets are highly efficient, where they have huge amount of farmers, and they have proper corporate tie-ups, right, with reference to the amount of sustainable practices that the farmers will be doing, and the amount of CO2 credits, or the carbon credits that they will be generated, and what will be the price. So they are already having a very proper formal corporatized standards, which we have to implement the same in the country, right? So that is why we have some proposed solutions here. So firstly, we have to incentivize the projects involving small and marginalized community more. The government of India must be on the same lines on which it promotes the zero budget natural farming, be trying to promote this particular form of carbon farming, because it will not only be increasing the agriculture productivity, it can also lead to doubling of farmers' income as proposed by the Ashok Dalwai committee. Next, we also understand that the farmers need regular training for minimum tillage, for this kind of sustainable practices. The farmers need to be informed, as we have seen from this case study. In these projects in Haryana and Madhya Pradesh, they are not even communicated, right? Next, when we talk about communication about project benefits and risks, this must also be communicated by the same, because there are risks of non-payment, some payment defaults. Next, Timely and assured payments must be done, particularly under a particular statute or a law which must be coming up within the same. Technological integration can also be done with reference to the use of Internet of Things, right? Also the use of drones, which can aid, and also the use of artificial intelligence, which can aid and assist the farmer in calculation of the carbon credits which are actually generated in real time for the farmers. And finally, this can be also integrated with a digital agricultural mission which was launched recently, which is a very mega kind of a agricultural initiative for the entire farming sector. Finally, there must be policy collaboration from the government side, and that is where we find there are huge opportunities for carbon farming in India. We understand, right, that there are many agroecological practices which are in the country that could generate $63 billion from 170 million hectares, right, offering farmers 5,000 to 6,000 acre more annually. So please do remember this data to quote in your mains answers, right? Also, regions like Indo-Gangetic Plains and Deccan Plateau are ideal for carbon farming due to extensive agricultural land. The coastal regions are facing some issues regarding with reference to the quality or the low fertility of land due to salinization, right? But we have to understand we can actually transform India from being country which is highly dependent on fertilizers and so on to dependent on carbon dioxide for fertilization, right? So here we have to also understand what are the various carbon farming schemes which are practiced worldwide. Firstly, US, Australia, New Zealand and Canada, they have very efficient voluntary carbon markets, right? Also, we can also learn from Chicago Climate Exchange and Carbon Farming Initiative in Australia, which have proper amount of rules, regulations, standards and flexible mechanism for forward contracts with the farmers there. We also have to implement the 4 per 1,000 initiative, which is an annual increase of 4% of the world's soil surface, right, carbon stocks, right, would nearly compensate the annual CO2 increase of the atmosphere. So if we try to increase the carbon content in the soil by only 4%, we can actually, compensate for the annual carbon dioxide emissions. And also, when we have to look at India's legal framework, recently the Energy Conservation Act of 2001 was amended to introduce formally for the very first time Indian carbon market, which is yet to fully effectively function in the country. So we must be taking concrete steps in this direction. Finally, we also have the CEEW, which recently conducted an industry stakeholder discussion on the same. So it will be very interesting what would be the main highlight coming out of the same. But in the meantime, you let me know in the comments as to what is the answer to this UPSC PYQ, that what is the best statement that is describing social cost of carbon. We have discussed a lot on this particular thing. You let me know what you think is the solution to this particular question. And also in the meantime, please do write mains answers. There is a mains question for you, that is, carbon markets present a promising avenue to transform Indian agriculture into a model of sustainable and lucrative farming. Comment based on the things we have discussed. You can attempt to write a question. You can let me know 2-3 of your points in the comments below. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. India and China agreed recently to resume Mansarovar Yatra border trade, after they have held talks in Beijing. And it is our own National Security Advisor Ajit Doval who held talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi at Beijing. And this is a very significant event because over a period of time we have seen a recent trend where the two countries are coming closer. And there are various significance, there are various debates also on the same, which we'll be trying to discuss right now. And this is very important for our prelims, where we have to look at current events of national and international importance, also for GS2, where we have to talk about India and its neighborhood relations. Now, India and China relations are always and constantly evolving over a period of time, right? We have undergone so many conflicts, so many wars, right? And right now we are seeing some signals of truce. Do you think that this particular developments right now, where China is warming up to India, right? China is trying to come closer to India for some reasons, is sustainable or not in the long term? You let me know in the comments, but I'll be trying to discuss as to what are the real politics in this particular scene. Now, recently we have seen in this particular news itself that the special representatives meeting, right, was held for the very first time between NSA Ajit Doval and China's foreign minister in the last 5 years, right? It was for the very first time. And we understand that out of various news articles that we can read, right, as of now we will be trying to resume Mansarovar Yatra, which is a very important spiritual, say, yatra for Indians, right? We have also agreed on a particular peace roadmap where we can resolve the border issues and the outstanding issues with China, right? Also, China and India has agreed on a 6-point consensus, which is extremely important for me. I'll be informing you of this. And also we have undergone so many other important events recently. As of now, we have seen this Ladakh issue being solved partially, where China has agreed to disengage from those regions. In the comment section, you let me know how closely you are following the analyst, and let me know of the regions which we discussed in the previous analyst sessions also, from where China disengaged. Also, our own Prime Minister and their own Chinese Premier met at Kazan at the BRICS meeting, and this meeting was also very, very significant for the two countries. So there are some kinds of, say, things which are evolving, changing over a period of time. So let us first look at the agreements and the announcements from the recent meeting. So after the two premiers of our countries, they met at Kazan, right? So they started of some major decisions between the two nations, that the two nations must be converging, must be agreeing with each other to solve the outstanding disputes. So what happened, what the major outcome? Firstly, Kailash Mansarovar Yatra will be resumed. Cooperation on trans-border rivers, which is always a very contentious point, because we understand that most of the rivers from the northeast, right, in the northeast India, they depend on the water streams from the Brahmaputra, and China have constructed so many dams on their part of our river, right, where the dams are kind of reducing the water flow into the country. So there must be a proper amount of cooperation. If needed, there must be live data sharing, real-time data sharing of waters between the two nations. So they have initiated this discussion. Next, they are also trying to revive the Nathula border trade, which was a very important kind of a, say, trade outpost for the two countries in the past, and from where the two countries can also reduce their logistical costs, right? And also they are trying to have various commitments to peace and stability along border. So we have this huge border with China, which in all of the sectors we have some or the other conflicts. So China is also agreeing to reduce the number of conflicts by engaging, and this will be via various amount of mechanisms for diplomatic and military negotiations, correct? And the various 6 consensus which I discussed as of now, right? Please do remember each and every consensus, because for any answer related to India and China, you can mention the 6 consensus. So firstly, this will be kind of on the same note that the two countries want to maintain peace on the border. They want to resolve the outstanding boundary dispute, as you can see here that there are many points of concern along this entire stretch of India and China border, correct? Next, there must be confidence building measures as to which the two countries can build more confidence between themselves. There can be more cross-border exchanges of people, of trade, and various other services too. There can also be enhanced coordination of major events, of major, say, debates which are happening internationally. For example, with reference to climate change, India and China are on the same boat. With reference to, say, the trade matters at the WTO, India and China are at the same page. So with reference to this, we can also have some coordination maybe at the United Nations, and maybe if China and India tries to improve ties further, we can also bargain for the UNSC seat that China has perennially opposed against India. And also we find that there must be future engagements between the two nations, right? The future engagements Firstly, within the 6 consensus, they have declared that the next special meet will be in India in 2025, that is next year. So these are the various consensus that the two countries are trying to agree between themselves, because we have to understand the mutual significance. Now here we are starting the main discussion. We have to understand the mutual significance as to why these two countries have fought in the past, have also come back in the past, again fought, and right now they are trying to warm up against, warm up to each other. Why? Because there are various reasons. If India and China are trading with each other, are having borders, are having shared waters, in case of Indian Ocean and say the Pacific Ocean, if China and India are both developing countries, obviously there can be some convergences. And that is why we have to understand significance of China for India and significance of India for China. Firstly, we have to understand India is dependent with reference to APIs, with reference to pharmaceutical sector, solar cells. Most of the solar cells, solar PV modules are imported from China, right? We have so many other raw materials such as critical minerals where we have the same coming from China. So India is dependent on raw materials for most important crucial industries, right, in the country. Next, the technology and digital infrastructure. For example, the handset, the smartphones, right, we all know that they originate mostly from China. Also with reference to complicated communication technologies such as 5G, also the upcoming 6G, the older models of 3G, 4G technologies of communication, they have some components of Chinese origin. Also with reference to various other digital infrastructure, be the payment infrastructure, be it the various online, say, services, they also emanate from China as of now, right? We also have, as of 2020, right, this is 2020 data, around 18 unicorns where China have significant investments, correct? Apart from that, we also have trade route dependency, where we have to understand 55% of India's trade passes through South China Sea and Malacca Straits, 55%. Correct? So that is also very significant, and do not forget this data. These are very important. Next, we have to understand the other side also. When we talk about China, India is important. Why? Because China is engaged with bilateral trade amounting to $100 billion in favor of China. We have a major trade deficit with China. On the other hand, China is benefiting with this trade deficit, right? Also, India has a growing consumer base and technological sector. The demand for smartphones will be going up. The demand for electric vehicles will be going up. The demands for various other electronic items will be going up, where it will be benefiting China, correct? Next, we have various multilateral engagements at WTO, at climate change forums, where various other things where China and India agrees on. Right? These are very important things, particularly with reference to issues pertaining to global south, and when it matters, right, countering the Western initiatives and Western hypocrisy. India and China are sometimes on the same boat, correct? And finally, there are lots of Chinese investors in the country, correct? And they will be trying to reap better kind of returns from the Indian stock markets, right? So these are the various mutual, say, significances. Now, what are the various way ahead we have to understand? We have discussed why China, how China is coming close to India as of now. Also, we have understood the various significance with terms of two nations, but there is always a but, that there are some issues which are outstanding. So this way forward will be various issues which we have to solve. Firstly, we have the various border disputes. These are non-negotiable. If China does not recognize India's sovereignty, right, things cannot improve over a period of time. When we try to understand the principle of sovereignty, right, lies with, with ourselves, with this, India's own, say, regions are, say, illegally captured by various nations such as Pakistan and China. So these are how we must be trying to resolve the border disputes over a period of time, and this should be not via war or not via violent means. This must be with reference to diplomatic negotiations and various amounts of channels, correct? Next, there is also a Trump factor right now. Donald Trump is trying to, say, reimpose various tariffs and various amounts of, say, other restrictions on China, including India also. So we have to understand that we as a country, we India, have to include the US in the calculation. So China is very wary of US right now because the particular political dispensation in the US is not friendly with China. It's threatening with various tariffs. Maybe there can be a possibility of tariff war in the upcoming years. So there, India needs to be very cautious, because we have to understand, while India is close to the West with reference to Quad, with reference to various alliances, right, with reference to Blue Dot Alliance, with reference to various other initiatives, so India needs to tread very carefully in this matter. Next, we also have to address the trade imbalances, as you can see in this figure. Right, the trade imbalance is becoming very serious over a period of time, and it is increasing. The trade deficit is increasing with China. So that also must be addressed, because what China does, it actually sets up various shadow enterprises in Southeast Asian nations, in various other parts of the world, where those products are essentially Chinese products, but they rebrand themselves, they change the origin, they change some of the branding, and they try to import the same to India. Apart from this, China on itself also flouts various international norms with reference to trade, due to which there are trade imbalances, and that is also unfair. So that is what India must be also addressing. With reference to concerns, right, in Chinese projects such as the BRI, as you can see, right, the BRI has ambitions where they are passing very close to India, and also essentially over, say, impinging on India's sovereignty. So this also must be addressed, and also people to people contacts must be established, because as of now we have an historical low perception of China, right, and their administration and their, say, overall vision. So that is where people to people contacts must be enhanced over a period of time. Also, we must be sorting out geopolitical rivalry in the region, be it the various trade issues. So India and China are always in this kind of rivalry. So this is why we have to understand the, say, main intention of China over a period of time, right. We have this say political dispensation changing in the West, which can be against China, right. So that is why this is one of the reasons why China cannot fight this war alone. So it is trying to sort out some of the issues with some of the nations in the particular neighborhood, so that over a period of time it won't be alone with reference to various economic and, say, other kind of contacts. So that is why we must be understanding the significance of this particular initiatives. So it is to be seen as to how China will be delivering their own set of promises. And on the other side, we have this mains practice question. You let me know 2-3 of your points in the comments below, and now we'll be moving on to the next one. Now, recently Supreme Court has ordered the central government to formulate a policy to manage sacred groves, right, which is a very important portion of your prelims with reference to issues on environment, ecology and biodiversity, and also with reference to GST conservation. Now, to understand sacred groves, we have to look into this picture very closely. Now see, this is a particular forested area where we see some amounts of rituals, or say some religious structures present. So these are exactly what forest groves are. For some communities, there are some portions of forest areas where those communities consider those portions as God or in their own spiritual importance, right? So that is where there are, almost say 10 to 15 thousands of sacred groves in our own India. And we don't only have this in India itself, we have sacred groves in all parts of the world, where there are various tribal communities, some local communities who revere some forest areas as their own local goddess and gods. So that is where there's mainly forests, sacred groves are characterized by, say, some small patches of trees with some religious structures, right, which are traditionally protected by the local community, which are having high amount of religious and cultural significance, correct? And when we combine all of this, the main intention is to form a sanctuary, a kind of a socially protected area for nature and spirituality. So when we try to preserve these particular areas, this automatically also protects the local biodiversity. In many of the sacred groves, for the matter, there are some animals also which are considered highly sacred for the local communities. Now, do you have one example of this particular animals which are very sacred for some communities? You let me know in the comments below. Also, when we talk about sacred groves and their prevalence in the country, in India we find them in Western Ghats, Himalayan, northeastern and central hilly tracts, as we can see here. Correct? Now, the importance of sacred groves is paramount. Firstly, they help in nature conservation, soil conservation, because these particular sacred groves, they have a huge amount of forested areas, and that can actually help in soil conservation. Next, sacred groves can also mitigate natural disasters, for example against floods, by preventing the excessive flow of water, hence acting as a natural break. Correct? Next, it also aids in biodiversity conservation by protecting the forests themselves, and by the community also, which also tries to protect the local flora and fauna. Next, they are generally dedicated to a particular deity, hence it is highly important for their significance with reference to religion. And also, sacred groves are denoted by some local communities which are having some local wisdom, who also tries to have some economic produce from the forested portions, from the sacred groves, where their own livelihood is also sometimes dependent on these groves and the surrounding forests too. So they also foster a feeling of community pride and heritage and identity for these local people. So the importance is highly undeniable for these local communities, and this is why the Supreme Court recently directed the center to have a comprehensive policy to protect the entire sacred groves and in the entire country. But on the other hand, the center argued that already the protection of the same, the onus of the same, lies with the state governments under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, where the center has told that the main onus is lying with the state government. But the Supreme Court again reiterated the value that we are not only talking about biodiversity here, we are also talking about that identity, that pride, that heritage of the local community too. So this is where the center must be stepping in, where the ministry has been advised to develop a plan for a nationwide survey, to conduct a particular survey of all the sacred groves in the country, to have updated data as to how many people we are talking about, how many sacred groves we are talking about. After we have done that, though, the boundaries of the sacred groves have to be demarcated, right? So that particular forest grove can be have a proper amount of protection. Also, the Supreme Court reminded the center that the National Forest Policy of 1988, which is backed by the top court's most important case, that is known as T.N. Godavarman, which accorded high amount of rights for the forest, for forested regions, correct? And that is where the Supreme Court also told that sacred groves lie at the heart of anthropology, which is human culture, religion, which is spiritual belief, rules and rituals, and ecology, that is nature environment. There can be nothing better than this. So that is why the Supreme Court also highlighted one particular village efforts, which you can use as case studies in your answers. This is a particular village known as Pipalantri in Rajasthan, where barren land were transformed into lush and green sacred groves by the local community, correct? So this is showing that local community can transform these particular lands and have the twin objectives, or the threefold objectives, of conserving human culture, ecology, and also maintaining their religious identities. In this article, recently the Narendra Modi-led panel met to select the new National Human Rights Commission. It is a very important statutory body in the country, where it is highly important for our prelims revision. I know for the matter that most of you already know this kind of content, but prelims is upcoming soon. That is why we need to revise our concepts again. So here, for Indian polity and governance, we have to look at NHRC, and also for our mains, we have to also talk about various statutory, regulatory, and various quasi-judicial bodies. So here, firstly, we'll be talking about what is the Human Rights Commission all about. Firstly, it is about the guardian of human rights in India. Human Rights Commission is tasked as one of the most important, government bodies in the entire country, because it looks into the violations of human rights. It is having the various ideals and principles of the Constitution of India, and also with reference to the Paris Statute on Human Rights, correct? It is an independent and statutory body in the country under the Act of Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. The composition of the same is that there will be a chairperson, which can be either a retired Chief Justice of India or a judge of the Supreme Court. Next, the members will be including a sitting or a retired judge of the Supreme Court, a sitting or a retired Chief Justice of a High Court, and 3 individuals with at least 1 woman, right, with knowledge and experience in human rights, right. Next, also apart from this, there will be 7 ex officio members which belongs to national commissions with reference to minorities, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, women and backward classes. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights are also included with reference to ex officio members, and also the Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities are also included, right. The main powers that they have with reference to is say powers which are concurrent to that of a civil court. They can call for information or reports directly from the central government and also from the state governments, which make them highly important in, say, investigating any offense regarding any human right violation. They also can order for the payment or compensation for the various damages that the people are going through with reference to their human rights violation. They can also initiate a legal proceeding and also for interim relief, that is a temporary relief for the people who are concerned, and also they can approach the High Courts and the Supreme Court regarding these matters. So these powers are very important. And here the main article is talking about the appointment of the NHRC, of the new chairman of the NHRC, where we have to look into the same, that the appointment is carried out by the President of India, right. It is based on the recommendations of a 6-member committee with the Prime Minister as the head. Apart from the Prime Minister, we have 5 other members such as the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Deputy Chairperson from the Rajya Sabha, the leaders of opposition from Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and also the Union Home Minister. Appointment of a sitting judge or a sitting Chief Justice of a High Court, correct. The sitting judge will be from the Supreme Court, or a sitting judge from the High Court will be only be possible after the consultation with the Chief Justice of India too, correct. The term is 3 years or 70 years of that concerned person, and they are also eligible for reappointment. The salaries, allowances and other conditions will be decided by the central government, and that is where we understand in this entire appointment structure of the chairperson and the other members, the central government is kind of supreme. So this is sometimes why there are some kind of debates or issues by experts which term the NHRC as a toothless tiger, because on paper they are very having very efficient powers, but when it comes to effectuation of those powers, sometimes it has been seen that they are falling short. And the main context of the news is that our own Prime Minister has formed this committee to select the new chairperson, correct. And also, as you can see here in this entire panel, you will be understanding that the ruling dispensation will be having more say on the reappointment of, or say the appointment of any member in the NHRC. Also, did you know that the President of India can remove the NHRC or the chairperson members under certain circumstances in cases of proven misbehavior or incapacity? The Supreme Court will be conducting an inquiry within the same. On the results of the inquiry, the removal will be done. And also, when it comes to the various functions, it will be inquiring into any violations of human rights or negligences. It can visit prison and detention centers to look into the conditions of the prison inmates, because the prison conditions in India are very deplorable, and sometimes from time to time they can visit and review the same. They can also review constitutional and legal safeguards with reference to human rights and the implementation of the same. It can also analyze factors such as acts of terrorism as to how they can impact the social fabric and say the overall human rights fabric in the country. They can also study treaties and international human right instruments and implement and suggest the same in the country. They can also promote and conduct research into the human rights and how we can preserve the same. They can also enhance human rights literacy via increasing awareness between the people, right? Also, as you can see in the NCRTs themselves, we have the front and the back pages which are dedicated for our preamble, for the various human rights, for the various amounts of awareness awareness that the government of India and its associated agencies or bodies are entitled to propagate with reference to awareness. So it can also do the same. It can also support non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and assist in their functioning. It can also take suo motu actions with reference to any inquiry with reference to human rights violations, right? And finally, it will be looking into promotion of the human rights, correct? And also we have to understand that NHRC cannot inquire into any matter after 1 year has elapsed from the date the act was, occurred. So that is also something which we have to remember for our prelims examination too. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. In this article, we'll be talking briefly about the gold bond scheme and why it is becoming unsustainable for the government to continue further. So it is very important for our prelims with reference to economic and social development. When we talk about the sovereign gold bond scheme, correct, the government of India is considering discontinuing the sovereign gold bond scheme because simply the cost of maintaining this particular scheme is becoming too much for the government to bear. And also recently the government has announced the boosting of investments in gold via reduction in the import duty of gold. So this has also increased the demand for gold investments in the country because simply the import duty was reduced. So if the people are investing in gold in this manner, so if we have too much of cost in this way, we can reduce the same. Correct? Now we have to look at some of the basics. Firstly, when we talk about sovereign gold bond scheme, they are actually akin to purchasing gold, but you will be not buying gold in physical form. You will be buying gold in a format of a bond, where the bond, for example, whatever money it is denominated, for example, it is 100. You will be purchasing 100 rupees worth of gold. But here the minimum investment is 1 gram. So whatever the market price is, so pertaining to the price of that particular gram, right, your bond will be issued. And whenever you will be getting any bond, you will be getting some interest payment which will be paid semi-annually at the rate of 2.5%, right, per annum. And also the price, we have to understand, will be determined on the basis of simple average closing price of 999 purity gold for the last 3 days, correct? And the investment limit is minimum of 1 gram, maximum of 4 kg for normal people like you and me, right? We have to understand, right, there are many individuals who invest in gold because they find gold as a very safe option, correct? And that is where individuals can invest after up to 4 kg, and for HUFs, right, this is also 4 kg, and 20 kilo is for trusts. And for maturity, it can have a maturity of 8 years with exit option at 5 years. So after 5 years, if you feel to exit, you can exit the same. The premature withdrawals are allowed subject to changes in the taxes, and taxation will be calculated, right, on the basis of your interest rate, right? And the capital gains, whatever the capital gains will be getting from the same, will be exempted after 5 years, not before that, correct? And there are some more features, for example, that the sovereign gold bonds are tradable on the stock markets, stock exchanges within a particular fortnight or 14-15 days of its issuance, correct? The first sovereign gold bond was issued in the country on October 30, 2015. Investors are assured of the market value of the gold, and that is why it is very safe, correct? Next, they are also eligible to be used as collateral with reference to any banks, NBFCs, or any other financial institution, correct? Because we know this is as good as gold, right? And also these are substitute for holding physical gold, and gold bonds will be redeemed upon maturity at a particular price that is prevailing in the market. Also, why we have to discuss right now, the government is seeing the sovereign gold bond with caution, simply because it is becoming unsustainable and expensive. And the main reason why government introduced this sovereign bond was to finance the fiscal deficit. We know that to finance the fiscal deficit, the government can adopt many mechanisms. One of the same was sovereign gold bonds. But we have to understand that this is becoming quite unsustainable as of now. The price is quite high. Initially, there used to be 10 tranches or 10 times in a year where the government used to release the gold bonds, but right now they have come to only 2. Correct? Apart from this, we have seen that the custom duties also come down. So it is a better alternative way instead of paying this 2.5% of interest on this particular thing, right? So this is where brings me to this 2016 PYQ. You let me know what is the answer of the same in the comment section below. According to a recent research which has been published in the famous science journal Nature, right, huge marine heat wave killed around 4 million Alaskan birds in the years of 2014-16, and that is what brings us to the concept of marine heat waves. Now we understand during normal conditions, right, there is a healthy mixing of cold and warm waters in the ocean. Also on the other side we have solar heating, right, we have evaporation, formation of clouds, precipitation, but this is perfectly normal. But bring in climate change, bring in global warming. What happens in global warming? The overall temperature of the globe, or say the Earth's atmosphere goes up, due to which we have, heavy amounts of temperature even over the ocean. And when we have high temperatures over the ocean, the upper surface of the ocean becomes hot, and this is where this will not be leading to healthy mixing of cold and warm water, where there will be a kind of, and say, increased amount of temperature between this particular ocean waters. Correct. Also with reference to climate change, we have weak winds in various parts of the world, where also with reference to, say, increased solar heating, increased temperature, the water becomes even much more warmer. So this is where we understand a particular heat wave over the ocean can persist, a particular temperature can deviate by around 3 or 4 degrees Celsius with reference to the average conditions which earlier prevailed, right? If the temperature is exceeding that level, we know that particular condition as heat wave, if and only if this condition is persisting for at least 5 days. And this is not say very unusual thing which is happening. As of now, as we can see in the entire world, there are many parts of the world which are experiencing high amount of marine heat waves, and this is leading to various concerns. Firstly, extreme weather conditions leading to more and more intense storm. As you can see here, if there is a particular marine heat wave here, and later say in the months of monsoon, right, if this is moving on to the upper Bay of Bengal, this can lead to formation of much more stronger cyclones, leading to greater destruction of lives, right? This can also lead to greater ocean acidification, deoxygenation, and so on, because warmer water will not be retaining that amount of oxygen, and this can lead to greater amount of ocean acidification. Also, biodiversity habitat loss is there because of, say, the changes in the ocean temperatures will be impacting the marine life. As we can see here, the healthy amount of kelp forest and also the coral organisms which are present, they face say permanent threat of extinction, right? So these are the various impacts. On the same, we have to consider a recent case study which you can use in your, say, various answers with reference to this particular thing which is taking place in Alaska. As you can see, these are what we know as, say, the common muddies which are found in those regions, and this is their condition right now. And also from 2014-16, their population is coming down due to something which we know as the blob. This blob is a huge marine heat wave around the waters of Alaska, which are causing record-breaking mass deaths of these species. And we have to understand they are the victims of a domino effect of oceanic changes related to warming oceans. And also we have to understand that these critically for the muddies, it leads to the collapse in the fish that they depend on. Due to higher say temperature waters, the fish stock have gone down, and also they are dying off in huge numbers, right? For decades the world oceans have absorbed over 90% of excess heat as of now, but right now they are not able to do so, correct? And this is why a severe toll on coral reef, kelp forest and other marine ecosystem is being witnessed as of now, right? So with this, we'll be moving on to the next one. In the last article today, all 17,130 police stations in the country have been linked successfully through the CCTNS. Now, what is this particular thing we have to look at? Now, this is an online platform which is, the full form of the same is Crime and Criminal Tracking Network and Systems. So, this is a central online platform to file FIRs, charge sheets, investigation reports, and so many other things, right? This is an initiative of the Ministry of Home Affairs under the National E-Governance Plan, and this is trying to interlink all the police stations in the country. So this is a factual thing. Please try to note the things down and retain these for prelims, right? For the police, it is, for the police forces, it is performing some important functions such as it aids in investigation, data analytics, research, policy making, and for the citizens, it's help us in reporting and tracking of complaints verification by the police, right? Now, here we understand the records of the crimes and the criminals are accessible at one police station, right? Which are, say, particularly at one police station or so on, will be available with reference to any other police station too. So this is the beauty of this particular platform, of this digital platform, where this is a centralized kind of say a facility where we have all of the police stations linked on the common platform. This is connected to the central platform, which is actually an initiative of the Ministry of Home Affairs. Within the same, we have the National Crime Records Bureau, with a central nodal agency to manage this. So at the center, we have the National Crime Records Bureau with a particular budget of 2,000 crores when it was launched, correct? And we have to talk about its objectives. Firstly, the main objective is to make the police citizen friendly and make their operations much more transparent. So citizens and also they can go onto the platform to look into any, say, of the important changes, any of the important data. It is also providing the investigators officers of the civil police with the tools, the technology and information with reference to criminal tracking, with reference to registration. Everything can be done here. It is also assisting in other areas such as law and order, traffic management, correct? Because it's a centralized portion, and also it helps in interaction and sharing of information among police station, district, state, UT headquarters and other police agencies. It also assists various senior police officers for better police management and helps keep track of the progress of various cases. And finally, it also helps reduce the manual and redundant record keeping, which earlier the police, they have to maintain through DARCs, postal records and so on. So this is exactly what we have to understand. As of now, recently, all of the remaining 40 police stations have signed on to this portal, completing 100% deployment, right? And right now, police stations are registering 100% FIR through this digital platform, and this platform can generate analytical report, any criminal say report with reference to criminal cases, property cases, crime statistics at the police station level, right? This kind of data is not available to the citizens. Well, citizens, they can file their own complaint, track and also get police verifications, various other matters, correct? And recently there have been some functional modifications in the CCTNS application with reference to the the 3 new criminal laws, right? With reference to the changes, these are firstly, right now, these include the seeking of permission of senior officers before making any arrest in some cases, providing information of arrest to relatives and friends, designated police officer and display of arrest information, serving of summons, provisions to send daily reports, forensic investigation of all of the cases, right? Mandatory videography of the crime scene, and also biological samples to be collected on the request of police officers, police to inform progress of the investigation to the victim within 90 days, and new timelines. So these are the various changes which have been incorporated in this particular, say, network, in this particular digital framework, which helps in the seamless operation of police say forces. And these particular changes are very important with reference to the management of the criminal jurisdiction with reference to the new laws. That's why these changes have been done. You don't have to remember these changes in details. This is just to illustrate the various incorporations with reference to digital technology used in governance of our country. So with reference to this, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Till we meet again soon, you please attempt the quiz which is following up. All the best and best of luck.